I lived in Union, Maine for the first 14 years of my life, and if I could choose again, I probably would have never gone down into that basement. That old house nestled itself in the middle of a wild blueberry field. Its faded tin roof and peeling blue-painted wooden walls looked like the shedding skin of something once alive. Every time the wind blew, the house groaned, soft, drawn-out noises, like someone whispering secrets through a blood-clogged throat. My mother used to say, "Never go down to the basement if I'm not home." She never explained. She just emphasized it. Then locked the basement door like it led to a world that wasn't meant to be seen. I used to think she was just overly cautious. But now, when I think back, I'm not sure if she was trying to protect me from what was down there, or protect it from me. Our basement had 13 wooden steps, old, creaky ones that whined under every footfall. The number 13 always made me uneasy, not because I was superstitious, but because with every step down the air would grow thicker, colder, and my heartbeat heavier. I used to count the steps over and over, hoping I was wrong, but it was always 13. The last step sat just a little lower than the rest, like it wanted to drag your foot down deeper. That day was overcast and cold. My mom had gone to the market in Rockland. I was home alone with Duke, my floppy-eared hunting dog. I remember how he lay curled up by the basement door, whimpering softly, his eyes fixed on the crack under the door like something was moving on the other side. So I opened it. The moment the wooden door creaked open, a blast of freezing air hit my face. Damp rot, mixed with wood ash and rust, choked my lungs and made me cough. Duke shrank behind my legs, refusing to go any farther. I took the first step. Each stair dragged me deeper into a place where light faded, and silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was threatening. When my feet hit the concrete floor, my heart was pounding. I flicked on the flashlight. To the right, wood stacks, the furnace, and Dad's old workbench. To the left, one small room, once used as my brother's bedroom before he left without a word years ago. The flashlight flickered, casting shaky beams over the tall piles of wood. Their shadows stretched long along the walls like bony arms reaching for me. Then I heard it, a faint moaning sound, barely a whisper, like breathing. I couldn't tell where it came from, couldn't tell if it was human or the wind, but it was close. That's when Duke bolted up the stairs, claws scratching at the steps like something was chasing him from behind. I backed up, right into a freezing metal sheet. My hands were trembling, and then I stepped on a nail. Pain shot straight through my foot and into my chest. I screamed and collapsed onto the cold concrete floor. Blood soaked through my sock, pooling on the damp cement like it had awakened something that had been sleeping beneath it. I dragged myself toward the stairs, crawling up one by one like a fugitive being hunted through the dark. When I reached the top step, the front door burst open, and my mother stood there, eyes wide, groceries falling from her hands, watching me bleed into the wood. She didn't ask anything, didn't cry, she just held me. She bandaged my foot, then laid me out on the porch and told Duke to guard me. That afternoon, I saw her go back down into the basement. She didn't come up for 3 hours. I didn't hear cleaning, no sweeping, no movement, just silence, sucked dry. And when she came back, she locked the basement door, this time with 3 padlocks. I never dared go back down. But the basement started living on its own. Every night at exactly 2 a.m., I'd hear 3 knocks beneath the wooden floor of my bedroom. Thump, thump, thump. Always the same, steady, patient, as if someone or something was reminding me they were still there, waiting for me. Here is the translated passage in American horror narrative style, preserving the eerie rhythm and dread of the original Vietnamese text. Then that night came. I was lying in bed with Duke curled up at my feet. Just as I was drifting off to sleep, a wave of cold air swept across my face. I opened my eyes. In the dim shadows of the room, I realized I couldn't move, paralyzed. I wanted to scream, but my throat felt sealed shut. My eyes shifted slowly toward the corner of the room, where pale moonlight slipped through the cracked window pane. Something was standing there, tall, black, faceless. But it was watching me. It didn't move, it didn't breathe. It just stood there. Then it began to approach, step by step, no sound, no form, just a moving void, an absence of light itself. When it stopped beside my bed, I felt it. The cold, seeping from that formless shape like the chill of a corpse freshly unearthed. I glanced at the clock. 2:07 a.m. I woke up at 7:02 a.m. drenched in sweat. Duke was trembling at my side. I told my mother what I saw. She didn't speak, didn't ask. Her lips tightened, her face turned pale. And then, for the first time, I saw it in her eyes. Fear. Not worry, not concern. Real fear. She turned away and whispered, barely loud enough for me to hear, "Some things, once awakened, don't go back to sleep so easily." Ever since the night I saw the shadow standing in the corner of my room, my life hasn't really been life anymore. Every night I'd jolt awake, exactly at 2:07 a.m., always the same time, trapped in that haze between dream and waking, like I was being yanked backward, pulled into that one moment when everything first started to break. Duke, my loyal dog, changed too. He grew quiet, withdrawn. He spent his nights lying guard by my door, stiff as a statue. Sometimes I'd catch him growling under his breath, staring at the floor like he sensed something underneath, ears flat, hackles raised. But the strangest part, he never went near the basement door again. I used to think my mother was just a strict, stubborn woman, old-fashioned and overprotective. But the morning after that night, I looked into her eyes, puffy from sleeplessness, heavy with something unspoken, and I understood. She didn't hide the basement from me because she feared I'd get hurt. She feared I'd find out too much. That's when she started sprinkling salt across the basement door every night. She burned incense, whispered things I couldn't make out. I asked her what she was doing. She just said, to keep it down there. Not someone, not something, but it. And that word lodged itself deep in my mind like a splinter. I went back to the basement. I couldn't take it anymore. The knocking every night, the way Duke wouldn't sleep, the way the whole house had grown still, like it was holding its breath. I didn't care what my mom said. I didn't care about the fear. I had to go back. That afternoon was gray and quiet. Fog curled low over the blueberry fields like ghostly fingers. Mom had gone to visit my sick grandmother. I locked the front door behind me. Took Duke in my arms. He growled, squirmed, but I held him tight. I unlatched the first padlock. Click. Then the second. Click. Then the third. Click. Each sound echoed like a demon laughing somewhere deep inside my chest. The air down there was the same, cold, thick, suffocating. My flashlight cut through layers of dust, casting grotesque shadows on the walls. I stepped carefully down the 13 wooden stairs, no tripping, no nails, no blood this time. But what waited at the bottom was worse. As I reached the boiler room, I heard something. At first, it sounded like dripping water. Then it changed, became a soft, sniffling noise, someone crying, a child's voice. Duke let out a panicked yelp, leapt from my arms and tore back up the stairs. I wanted to follow, but my feet felt like they were rooted to the cement floor. I turned my flashlight toward the wall beside the furnace, and I saw it, a figure, just for a second, like a shadow darting past. But it was definitely a person, small, hunched, hair hanging limp, one hand dragging something heavy along the ground. I nearly dropped the flashlight. My arms went numb. My heart slammed against my ribs like it was trying to escape. I didn't chase it. I ran, all the way back up. I slammed the basement door shut, locked it, bolted it, and stood there gasping for air. That night I had a dream. In it, I was standing in the basement again. But it wasn't the basement as it was now. It was older. Everything was more worn. The paint hadn't peeled off the walls yet. The furnace still hummed, casting its faint glow. And in the middle of the room, a man was hanging. His feet didn't touch the ground. His head tilted sharply to the side, his neck twisted like it had been snapped by hand. But the most terrifying thing was, his face was completely covered by a black cloth, and right beneath him sat a child. Not crying out loud, just trembling, silently. I screamed in the dream, but I didn't wake up. The dream didn't end. Something pulled me closer, closer to the man's face. Then, the cloth fell away. I woke up soaked in sweat, my back drenched. Duke lay pressed against my side, whining softly. The nightlight flickered, then died, and beneath the wooden floorboards, the knocking began again. Thump, thump, thump. After that dream, I wasn't a normal kid anymore. Something inside me had changed. I started asking questions, the kind of questions I used to be afraid of knowing the answers to. I went to my mother, and I asked, "Where's Dad?" She froze. I had never asked her that before. He died when I was too young to remember anything. But now, I had to know. Did he die in this house? My mother turned away, didn't speak. She pulled out an old photo from her wallet. In it, my father was standing in front of the furnace, holding a wooden board, symbols scorched into it with charcoal. I looked closer. It was a Ouija board. My hands trembled as I held the photo. Mom didn't say a word. She just placed a hand on my shoulder and whispered, "Some questions are better left unanswered." But I knew, from her eyes, from the photo, from the dreams, and from the cold that seeped up from the basement every single night. I knew my father never left that basement, and from that moment on, I wasn't afraid of the basement anymore. I was afraid of what it was holding, and what I had accidentally awakened. That's when I started noticing the old man who lived next door, Gregor Kellen. Thin, frail, his gray hair a tangled mess like dry straw. He always wore the same fraying beanie and a worn-out khaki coat that had lost all its color. They said he used to be the handyman for most of Union, but lately no one saw him leave his porch. Maybe it was because I kept staring at his house from my front steps, because one gloomy afternoon he finally waved me over. "Kid," he said without any greeting, "that house of yours still got that basement?" The question lodged in my throat. No lead-up, no warning. He went straight for the one thing I was trying not to think about. I nodded. Gregor took a long breath, but his eyes didn't meet mine. He stared through me, like he was looking back at something far older and much worse. I went into that house once, nearly 20 years ago, back when I was still fixing heating systems. That house, it wasn't the same then. There was a kid, teenager, lived nearby. He used to sneak down into the basement, said he believed something was hiding down there. One day, he brought a Ouija board with him, and he never came back. Only the board was left, and the last thing I saw was a shadow, reflected in the mirror on the boiler room door. I swallowed hard. My heart pounded so violently it felt like it was trying to crawl out of my chest. "They never found a body," he said quietly, "only dried blood on the concrete. Your dad, he was the one who found it first. He went mad about a year later, then died." My dad. The word hit me like a blade, tearing through the silence my mother had wrapped around that story for so many years. "They tried to make your mother leave town after that," Gregor added, "but she stayed. Locked the basement door. Thing is, some doors you just can't keep locked forever." Here is the English translation of your horror story segment, adapted into American horror prose with attention to atmosphere, pacing, and psychological dread. That night, I couldn't sleep. The knocking came again, thump, 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 like a countdown ticking down from some invisible clock. I couldn't stop thinking about the look in my mother's eyes whenever I mentioned my father. I couldn't forget the black cloth covering the hanging man's face in my dream. And I couldn't shake the chill that seeped from the basement walls every night like cold sweat bleeding from the house itself. I needed to know the truth. The next morning, I rode my bike to the Union Town Library. The building was as old and dust-covered as everything else in this place. I lied to the librarian, said I needed to do a paper on local history. Then I made my way to the microfilm archives and started searching. Local news from 20 years ago. It didn't take long. Union Weekly, September 1989. Page 3. The unexplained death in basement of House 73. A teenage boy named Elijah H. vanished without a trace after being seen entering his home on 73rd Street. Police found no signs of forced entry. However, there were indications of occult activity. A partially burned Ouija board was discovered near the furnace. No body was ever recovered. The family left town shortly after. Elijah, that name, I read it again and again. My hands shook as I ran my fingers across the faded text. Why did that name feel so familiar? I rode home in silence. The sky had turned gray. The air felt heavier, thicker, like it was holding something back. When I opened the door, I found my mother sitting at the table, closing an old photo album in her lap. "Mom," I said, "you knew Elijah, didn't you?" She looked up, her face drained of color, eyes wide, then shut tight, like she was trying to push something horrible back inside her skull. "You shouldn't say his name." "Why?" "Because saying his name opens the door for him." I didn't ask anything else, but something inside me shifted, snapped. This wasn't just curiosity anymore. This was debt, something buried and waiting to be repaid. That evening at dusk, I returned to the basement. No mom, no Duke, just me, and my shadow stretching long and crooked down the stairs. I turned on the flashlight and began to descend, one step at a time, down those 13 wooden steps. Each creak sounded like a breath. Each breath felt like a warning. My heart pounded louder with every step. I scanned the furnace room, and then I froze. It was there, the Ouija board, sitting on the wooden table by the wall, burnt on one edge, coated in a fine layer of dust. But the spiral carvings in familiar AZ letters were still visible. The planchette, the wooden pointer, still sat in the center. The same board, the one my mother threw into the wood stove. I had seen it with my own eyes. It didn't burn, and now it was back. A cold draft brushed the back of my neck. The flashlight flickered. Somewhere to my left, I heard a creak, wood bending under weight, as if someone had just sat down in one of the old chairs. But no one was there. I stepped back, bumping into the side of the furnace. Thump. Something echoed beneath the floor. Then, the planchette began to move, slowly, smoothly. No one touched it. No one else was in the room. But it spun in circles, deliberate, patient, like it was waiting for someone to ask a question. Duday labandik tingang mi theo phong cách truyện kinh dị tâm linh, giữ nguyên nhịp kề và sự ám ảnh sâu sắc của Bangkok. I panicked. I ran up the stairs as fast as I could. When I reached the top, I turned back to look. The basement door was still open, but inside, it was black. Not dark, black. A void. A pit that felt bottomless. And in that brief moment, I saw it. A figure standing next to the Ouija board. Small, hunched, faceless. I don't remember when I fell asleep. All I know is, after seeing that Ouija board again in the basement, I locked the door with 3 padlocks, curled up next to Duke, and left the nightlight on. But that dim yellow glow wasn't enough to hold back the darkness I was about to enter. I dreamed. Or maybe I didn't. I opened my eyes and instantly knew something was wrong. I couldn't move, paralyzed. My whole body was frozen. Only my eyes could twitch and dart. The room was thick with darkness. No fan hum. No Duke breathing beside me. Just a faint whisper, like wind scratching across frosted glass. I turned my eyes to the corner of the room, the corner where the tall shadow had once stood. It was there. No face, no nose, no eyes, just a tall, black, human-shaped void. Twice my height, leaching light out of the air like it fed on it. It didn't move, but I knew it was watching me. My heart struggled in my chest, every beat like it was being crushed in a vice. I wanted to scream, but my throat was sealed shut. I wanted to turn my head, but my neck was pinned to the pillow. I couldn't fight, couldn't run. All I could do was wait, and then it moved. No sound, no contact, just a shadow floating across the floor, drifting silently toward me, until it hovered right next to my bed. Its eyes, or what shimmered in the holes where eyes should have been, pierced mine, like it was drilling into my memory. Then I felt it, something pulling me out of my body. I lifted, spun, and fell. Straight into the basement, but not the one I knew. The walls were scrawled with letters, red and smeared like fresh blood. Words shimmered across every surface. Elijah, never left, you are next. In the center of the room, a summoning circle, drawn in thick, black, reeking liquid. It glistened like it had just been painted. Inside it was me, arms and legs splayed open, mouth frozen in a scream, eyes rolled white. Surrounding me were faceless shadows, twisted mouths grinning ear to ear, cackling like broken radios tuned to the wrong frequency. They were chanting, performing a ritual. And I was the offering. I screamed, though no sound came. I crawled, dragging myself toward the version of me lying in the center. I reached out, my fingers trembling, and touched my own chest. The laughter stopped. All at once, the shadows turned to face me, and I was pulled again, spinning, twisting, ripped back into my body. I gasped for breath as I woke. Duke barked like mad beside me. The clock blinked, 2:08 a.m. My neck was soaked in sweat, my pillow drenched, my hands shaking. I sat up, then hissed in pain, my back burning. I pulled up my shirt, 3 long scratches. Bleeding. I looked down, blood trickled from my ankle. Even though I was still wearing socks, I looked around the room. The door was locked, windows shut, but across the wooden floor, wet footprints, long, glistening prints. From the door to my bed, I cried, not from pain, not from fear, but because I finally understood I hadn't just been haunted, I'd been chosen. For the next 3 days, I didn't sleep, couldn't. I was too afraid I'd end up in that basement again. But on the 4th night, my body gave out, and I dreamed again. This time it wasn't the basement. I stood in a small bedroom, wallpapered in blue, twin bed, stuffed animals lined the windowsill. On the desk, a school notebook. The name written on the cover, Elijah H. I turned. In the corner of the room, a boy sat hunched over, back to me, hands gripping a Ouija board. "Don't do it," I said, almost begging. He didn't move. I stepped closer, placed my hand on his shoulder, and in that instant, he leaned back, head tilted, face black as ink, eyes rolled white, mouth split in a grin that stretched ear to ear, and standing behind him, the tall shadow, staring straight at me. I woke up screaming. My mother burst into the room, arms around me trying to stop my convulsions. Her eyes, sunken, sleepless, held no surprise, no shock, just acceptance. She stroked my hair. "It's calling you now," she whispered. "What is?" I cried. She paused, then answered, "Elijah, and the thing that took him." "Duday la bandik tingang mi ko doan kao chao chong chung mamv. Twist, met langu chiot hoi. We van fong kik ding, am ang tanyant theo dung nip ko bangok. I cried. And my mother, she said nothing. She just sat there, silent. Then opened a drawer and placed something gently in my lap, an old, weathered notebook. On the very first page, written in trembling red ink, was a single sentence. The last one didn't escape. But someone else always can be chosen. I sat through the night with that notebook. Under the sickly yellow light of my desk lamp, each page revealed rushed handwriting, crooked and frantic, like they were scribbled in panic. Day 3 after the ritual, Greg hasn't been seen. The basement door locked itself. The board still has blood on it. What have I done? We only meant to summon his father, but what came through wasn't him. Greg laughed, then cried, then went silent. The whole room smelled like ashes. The air felt like something had died. I flipped to the last page. A photo fell out, faded, aged, taken with an old film camera. It showed my mother, 3 decades younger, smiling next to a boy. Brown hair, big eyes, grinning wide. On the back it read, "My boy Greg, age 10, our last summer." I couldn't believe it. Greg, wasn't he the old man next door? The retired handyman? Or was he? Part of me wanted to deny it, to reject the thought. But another part, the part that had seen the dreams, heard the crying, felt the basement's cold breath, knew the truth was finally rising from the rot. The next morning I faced my mother. "Who is Greg?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. She stared at me, long and hollow, until her eyes, always so calm, finally cracked. She sat down, took my hand in hers, and whispered, trembling, "Greg wasn't a neighbor. He was the son of my best friend. We were young, stupid. I lost your father in an accident. I couldn't accept it. We found a book and that board. Greg was just a kid. I never thought he'd be the one it chose. But when the ritual started, the thing that came through wasn't your father. It was something old, something hungry, and it needed a sacrifice." I pulled my hand away. My skin turned to ice. I wanted to scream, to break something, to unhear everything. My mother had offered up a child to chase after a ghost. And worse, she had lied to me for a lifetime. I stormed to my room, threw open drawers, ripped through papers, until I found it. The board, dust-covered, gray with ash. But as soon as I touched it, the wood felt warm beneath my palm. I took it down to the basement. The sun was setting. Light from the narrow window had turned amber, barely cutting through the swirling dust. I placed the board on the floor, right where I'd seen my father's blood all those years ago. I sat down and whispered, "What do you want?" My voice was dry, hoarse, not shaking, not scared, just ready. No answer, just the wind, thin and whining, whipping through the cracks in the walls. I asked again, "What do you want?" The planchette moved. No hand touched it, no fingers guided it, but it spun once, then slid, letter by letter. Taomu. I gasped. I backed away, but the board wasn't done. It kept writing. Givemeback. I fell back, heart pounding. Then a voice, a child's voice, echoed from the direction of the furnace, twisted, muffled, impossible to tell if it was a boy or girl. I didn't choose, I was taken. I don't want to be here. Your mother, she owes me. My body went cold. I couldn't tell if I was crying or shaking. I looked around. The walls had begun to crack. The air was thick, like breathing through ash. And behind the furnace, the shadow stood, still, silent, and pointing at me. I screamed. Not from fear, but from knowing I had no idea what to do. I didn't want to be the next. I didn't want to be taken like Greg. But I couldn't let that child stay trapped forever in the ashes of an old ritual. I grabbed the board, ran upstairs, pounded on my mother's door. She was already sitting there, eyes vacant, like she had heard everything. I threw the board at her feet. "Give him back. It was you. You have to pay." And for the first time I saw my mother break. She wept, howled like a child. She clutched the board to her chest and ran to the basement door, like she had been waiting for this moment her whole life. I didn't follow. I just stood there. At the top of the stairs, the light below flickered, then went out. A scream ripped through the house, then nothing, only silence. A thin black mist slipped out from under the basement door, like incense smoke, but it carried with it the scent of burned flesh. I went down. No mother, no board, just a silent, empty basement. And in the center of the concrete floor, a wooden planchette, snapped in half. I knew my mother was never coming back, but for the first time in years, the basement was silent. After that night, my mother never returned to the main floor. She didn't die, not in any normal sense. She was still alive, still ate, still stared at me with deep, chilling eyes. But she never spoke, not a single word. She only wrote. On scraps of paper, on torn fabric, even on the walls of her room. And every message said the same thing. No one escapes, no one escapes, no one escapes. 7 days later, on a quiet October morning, I woke up and didn't hear her footsteps. The house was still, heavy. I opened her bedroom door and she was gone. Lying cold, eyes wide open, mouth shut tight. In her hand was a folded piece of paper. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just took the note and read it. Forgive me, I had no other choice. The writing was shaky, broken, but I understood. After a quiet funeral, I left Union. Sold the house to a local lumber contractor with one condition: bury the basement, completely. Pour concrete, seal it forever, no door, no cracks, he agreed. But deep down I knew, nothing stays buried forever. I moved to Bangor, third-floor apartment, new life. I worked at a dusty old bookstore during the day. At night I read, I wrote, I tried to forget, but then I dreamed again. In the dream I was lost in a hallway, old, wooden. Every door was locked, except one, the basement door. It hung open, inside nothing but a dark abyss, endless. I stood in front of it, didn't go in, but couldn't walk away. And then, the knocking, thump, thump, thump. I woke up soaked in sweat. The clock read 2:07 a.m. The next night, same dream. But this time, my mother was standing in the basement, but it wasn't her anymore. Hair long and stringy, eyes black hollows, skin green-gray mottled with mold. But she smiled, a strange, soft smile. I kept it there, she whispered, but you still carry the mark, and marks are not so easily erased. I jolted awake. The room was empty. No Duke, my loyal dog, gone long ago. Only the sound of my own heart beating in the dark. I stopped sleeping, tried meds, tried incense, tried meditation. Nothing worked. Every night, 2:07 a.m., and the shadow in the corner was always there. It didn't speak, didn't move, just stood and watched. One night, after 3 days without sleep, I collapsed at my desk and dreamed. This time, no basement, no mother, no board, just a white room, empty, and me, alone. You finally came, a child's voice said behind me. I turned. Greg, not old, not twisted, just a 10-year-old boy, flannel shirt, holding the broken wooden planchette. I'm not angry, he said. I just don't want to be here anymore. Then why are you still in my dreams? I asked, voice cracking. Greg smiled, then faded into nothing. I woke up. The light in my room flickered. On my desk, a single black ink line drawn across a blank sheet of paper. We are not the only ones. I kept living, kept working, kept pretending. But I know the truth. The basement didn't stay in Union. It came with me. It's inside me now. I don't know if I'll ever escape, but I know one thing for sure. The shadow in the corner still stands there every night at 2:07 a.m.